May I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Good evening and welcome to Believe in the Journey podcast season 3. Listen, you guys, it is about to be a wonderful season. I'm glad that you've taken the time to come and join us, even though it's Super Bowl Sunday. I know a lot of you want to watch that game, but I thank you for coming in and tuning in tonight. I have a wonderful guest, Miss Bambi Lynn, and we're going to be talking about how she decided to really stop running from her purpose and to start walking in her purpose. But before we bring her up, let's go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together as you do each and every time. Without you, there is nothing. Everything that we do is for you. Let the words of my mouth hit the ears that need to hear. Let the message that is going to be delivered tonight fall upon the ears that need to hear. Even if they are not watching or listening to us live, if they're listening to the replay, let them get what they need from this conversation because you will be all through each and every word that we speak tonight. I thank you for your presence. I thank you for your grace. I thank you for your coverage. And I thank you for your blessings in every way, things that are seen and unseen. You are the will and the way of everything that we do in this life. And I thank you for this moment. In your precious and holy name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, you guys, I'm going to have Miss Bambi Lynn come up and we're going to talk. I'm excited. This is season 3. Oh my gosh. Hey, Miss Bambi.
Well, hello. I thought that Abraham and Moses were doing the countdown a second ago.
It sounded like it. It was so cool. We got a
Oh
new
my word, what is that?
platform and I swear this thing is so amazing and I like it. Everything's so crystal clear. Like it looks like I got perfect skin right now and I really don't. Because I got a couple little blemishes over here, but you can't really see them. So that makes this thing make me look awesome right now.
There you go. I know. And my hair is all wind blown, just like we were just talking beforehand. I went to go hold Highland cows all afternoon.
But that sounds like it was a fun thing to do. I know if there was something like that here, I would definitely take my granddaughter to do that.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it was a lot of fun. It was hot though, and so my hair doesn't, doesn't see the kinds of blemishes on my hair here.
Listen, I told you I just added a couple little curls beforehand. Earlier today, I had on a baseball cap, and this side of my hair was doing something. I don't even know what it was doing. It had something going on. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to scare my guest tonight. So let me do a little something to it so that she's not frightened away.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't get scared. I only got scared of that countdown, from Moses and Abraham. That was the only thing I got frightened about.
Yeah, that's a very deep voice on there. I'm not sure, but it was definitely a deep one. Now, I want to ask you to give a little bit of background about yourself, and then I'm going to start asking you some questions.
You sure can. Well, I am a mom of 6 adult children. They're all married, living on their own. I have a set of identical twin boys and then 4 daughters. I have
Okay.
13 amazing grandchildren. I do have one grandson that found himself in the arms of Jesus hours after he was born. Our
Okay.
darling Isaac. And I am an author. I'm a published author, twice returned, and I have another one coming out called The God Who Sees in June. And
Okay.
I'm a blogger. I'm a woman of influence, and I'm an amazing storyteller. God has shown me how to use my life experiences and my life mishaps, to be able to tell the story of his grace and his love.
And that's amazing. One question that I want to ask, like when you sent me the message of wanting to be a guest on the show, you said that it took you 32 years to accept the name that you were given. Why did it take so long?
Well, my name is Bambi. So
I know.
that's why it took so long. um, it was not a name that is popular. It has different meanings by different people.
Hmm.
Think when women think of my name, they go, "Oh, that cute little Disney deer." When
Yeah.
men think of my name, they say, "Oh, where's your business card? I'd love to see you go dance tonight." So it has two different, opposite extremes of what my name means. When I was a
Yeah.
little girl, I didn't like my name at all. I was bullied a lot. Plus, we were poor. We didn't have a lot of money. So then it add a different kind of name on top of that. Uh,
Hmm.
when I did accept Christ as my savior, I did get mad of the fact because I knew that scripture said that he knew me from the foundations of time and he called me by name. So I always wondered, why would a God call me that? Um, so it was very difficult. I had been married and neither one of my husbands would ever call me by name. I was picked on a lot. And just like I said, if I went anywhere and somebody said what my name was, knew what my name was, they would make the comments. Women would go, "Oh, that's such a cute little Disney name." And, "Oh,
Hmm.
well, where's your business card?" So it just, by the time I turned 32 years old, I had kind of like had it. And I realized
Hmm.
that you can change your name. I didn't know that you could legally change your name, and I found out that you could. So
Okay.
I was going to change my name to Janet, and it was going to cost me $800. But every time I had a problem with God, every time that I had an issue with God, I would go to the water. And I would
Okay.
sit on this rock and I would have this discussion with God. Okay, God, why in the world would you ever name me somebody Bambi? You knew me. My mother just called my name out. You already named me that. And I went back and forth and had a kind of like a stern, intense conversation with God. And
Hmm.
I finally told him, I said, "I'm going to leave this place and I'm going to go to a bookstore. And if my name is not written inside of a book, the meaning of my name, I'm changing my name to Janet." Because there's no meaning either to my name. So I didn't even know who I was. Was I a deer? Was I cute? Or was I a dancer? What was I? So I went to the bookstore and I laid out all the books on the table and I put my name in black on a piece of paper, Bambi Lynn. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I just gave God an ultimatum. Like, okay,
Yeah.
who does that?
You know that don't work. That don't work at all.
So the first book that I looked into, my name wasn't in there. The second book that I opened up, my name was there. And
Hmm.
that was the first time in forever that I've ever saw the meaning of my name. And my name is Bambi Lynn. My first name is Bambi. My middle name is Lynn. And you put the name together and it means holy child.
See, God already
Well,
knew what he was
I
doing.
yes, it was a revelation to me. It was a lot of baggage lifted off of me. It was a lot
Hmm.
of bondage lifted off of me. When I wrote my name, in big bold letters, God also wrote my name and he said,
Hmm.
I want to remind you that you are my holy child and that I've set you apart. And I walked out of that bookstore a totally new person. I knew Christ. I've been saved since I was 16, but there was something that happened within inside of me
Hmm.
that I now had an identity. I
Yeah.
now knew that God did name me from the foundations of time and he did give me a purpose and he did give me a destiny. And now it was time for me to walk in it.
And that's definitely why I named, like, reading your bio. Like, when I ask people to send the bio, they don't understand why I'm asking. It's not just to get a background, it's to get a sense of the topic of what we're going to talk about. And I've had so many people, they're like, I don't think that goes with, and I'm like, if you read your own bio from a different perspective, you'll
Yeah.
understand why I do it that way. And so I had one lady, she was like, "Well, I thought your podcast was about overcoming triumphs and struggles and things." And I said, "It is. It definitely is those things. However, there was a process in order for you to get there. You just didn't arrive at the destination. So you got to give me what you went through so that we can arrive at that destination."
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
have a couple of people that are at the bottom that are talking about how they struggle with their own names.
Yeah.
Um, And my name is a unique name. I have no idea where my mama or my daddy got this name from. And so people mispronounce it all the time. That's one of the main issues why I give people a really cheesy analogy to help them remember or how to pronounce it. And the analogy is, when I say it's cheesy, I really mean it. And that is Velveeta, like the cheese.
Telvita,
So
Telvita.
it's Triveda. So people, you once I tell you that, I'm like, it's very cheesy. You definitely remember how to say Triveda. It's not hard, it's not complicated, but it is cheesy, and you won't forget it.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. That is awesome. And I, and I do tell women when I do events and
Mhm.
I go and speak, to women, I do tell them to look up their name, to find their
Yeah,
name, find their identity. Because if you don't know your identity, if you don't know your purpose, you can't walk into your destiny. There's
exactly.
a destiny to walk into. There's no mistakes.
No.
Our lives, even in our lives, there's no mistakes in the traumas that we have gone through, the
Hmm.
difficulties we have gone to, the families that we have been born into. There is no mistake. But what it does for us, it continues to lead our trauma not to a death sentence, but to a
Hmm.
life of prosperity sentence. And
Exactly.
people don't understand. We stay in our trauma, and my name was trauma to me.
Hmm.
I had husbands that would never call me by name, and I had people that put on uh, they put on a characteristic of my name that, when I was a kid and in my teenage lives, in my
Yeah.
teenage world, I lived that. I lived some of
Hmm.
the names that they called me because I didn't know my identity. But once you know your identity, and I tell women all the time, I will have a class that I will have um, index cards and stickers and colorful crayons or markers, and then
Hmm.
I will have name books there, and I have those women look up their names, look up the connotation of their name, look up the verse of their name, why, and then you begin to start thinking why, and stand in his presence to understand his goodness of why you were named,
Exactly.
that you were named. And that's an identity, and sometimes that's an identity crisis,
It
that
is.
to find their identity, and that you have to find your identity in Christ, and then you have to find
Yes.
your identity within yourself of who am I, who
Yes.
who does he say I am, and it
Yeah.
changes your perspective. It starts you on the journey of understanding your purpose.
Yeah. One thing I can say for me is learning how to walk in my purpose. It has been a journey because I literally have ran from doing these types of things, being out in the front, talking to people. But I realized a few years ago that my purpose is to connect each other through our experiences, but to know that God has always been included in all of those things. God has never left us. It is us who have left him and stopped listening for him in our lives, because that's that free will that we have. And so when we are trying so hard and so desperate to not seek him, he is going to do what he does all along. He knows our purpose for that he has for us. It was already written before we even knew anything about ourselves. And so when we start trying to go against that, we end up down a road that God didn't plan for us, but the destination always leads back to him if you're patient and understanding that God is not going to put you in a situation that he's not going to provide a way out. And sometimes we get lost and we want to just keep going astray. And God is like, okay, I'm going to let you go for so long, but I'm going to reroute you to the destination in which you have been created, and finding that purpose through those traumatic experiences. And it allows you, like I tell people all the time, don't be ashamed of what you've experienced in this life, because someone else needs to see God's presence in what you overcame.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be ashamed of what you went through, how can you honor God and give him the glory if you don't acknowledge what you went through? Don't hide the trauma, because the trauma is God's way of showing, I instilled all of the things that you were going to need to get through this. Acknowledge me and I will continue to walk with you. I will keep you covered in everything that you're going through. And I think walking in purpose, there are a lot of people right now who are lost. They don't know what their purpose is. They don't know how to ask God, how do I find out who I am? And the exercises that I think that you do are helping by that name, because we can be called many things. And I know sometimes I have been called everything except a child of God, because you meet those people and they don't like whatever it is. They may not like the shoes you wore that day, and they may not like the shirt that you got on or whatever, but whatever their crazy little reason is for not liking you does not signify God's calling on your life and his presence within your life. So I want people to understand that if God has you and if you decide to walk with him, he's going to let your name be spoken in ways that you never even imagined, because there's glory that's attached to your name.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and you said a whole lot,
Yeah.
in that whole thing. So I just wanted to kind of like, decipher it and tear it apart a little bit to,
Go ahead.
your name is so important. And I think that sometimes, I'm not sure if so many people actually walk away from God the way that we think they do.
Mm-hmm.
That life is so hard. And until somebody told me one time, until you understand Jesus, your brother, you're never going to understand God, your father. Because some of us have come from so much trauma. And a lot of the trauma that we have experienced have come from man figures, have come
Yes.
from leaderships, have come from fathers and uncles and grandfathers, people that we trusted in. And so it such reminds me of the book called The Shack. When Mac had to go to the, have you ever read this, Shack?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when Mac had to go to the cabin, you know, God represented woman first,
Mm-hmm.
because he needed the comfort of a woman. He needed the comfort of a mother. And until it got hard, that he then needed the comfort of a father, because God is male and female.
Yes.
And when I saw that movie, it resonated to me, and it resonated so deeply to me, because it's kind of like when the Holy Spirit took him to the garden, and Mac was so mad that the garden looked a mess, all these weeds over and all over the place. And he's like, how can this be glorified? And she just said, just wait. At the end of the movie, that garden changed, that garden was put together. And I think that that's our relationship with Jesus, and our relationship with God, is that it's a journey. It's a faith journey. And sometimes we fail at the faith. Sometimes
Yes.
we fall down at the faith,
Yes.
because our lives have been so broken and so
Mm-hmm.
into pieces. And until we understand what Christ really did for us at the cross, and what those scars represented that he carried, for each and every one of us. We all have scars. I
Yes.
just recently, when I was in my late 20s, I think I was 24. It was in 1993. I had a pressure canner blow up on me. And,
Oh,
and a pressure canner is what you can with. Well, I had
yes.
spaghetti sauce inside that pressure canner, and something happened to the pressure, and the whole spaghetti sauce blew up in my
Okay.
face, in my ex-husband's face, on my breast, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to take me to the burn unit, and I was there for 17 days. And 5 of those days, they would bring me inside of this room, that they would put me on this metal bed, and tie my hands, and fill me with morphine, and scrub my breast. Scrub
Mm-hmm.
it until they couldn't scrub it anymore. And after 5 days, they finally said, you know what? We can't scrub this anymore. This is really devastating and hurting this woman. Let's put on new skin. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's what, it's such a representation of what Christ does in our own lives.
Yes.
There are some things that we have been so broken, we have been so traumatized with some things in our lives, that, we're going through the scrubbing process, we're going through the healing process. And then finally, God rubs his hand on our forehead and said, you know what, let's give her new skin.
Mm-hmm.
Give her new
Let's
skin.
make her new. Yeah.
Let's make her new. Let's just make her new. And I love that I don't like the fact that I went through that, but I love
Mhm.
the illustration that God has given me today for me to know that sometimes you're scrubbed and sometimes you get new skin.
Yes.
Because it depends on your personality, it depends on what he can do, it depends on how the peeling of the onion is happening within our own lives. But all
Absolutely.
of us have choices. All of us have, there's none of us are going to leave this earth with no trauma. There's none of us
Exactly.
are going to leave this earth with no scars. You know, those
Mhm.
scars and that trauma, just like we said earlier, I believe those scars and those trauma is not a death sentence.
No.
It is a sentence that my story, I sell t-shirts on my website that says my story, your first aid kit. That's what my
Okay.
story's for. My story was not meant for me to continue to tell it over and over and over and over again. I mean, we know those kind of people. When we go into a room and they only talk about the trauma, they only
Yeah.
talk about, and then after you finally like kind of like gradually walking away, you know, further and
Yeah.
further away because you don't want to hear it anymore. Our stories are not meant for us to be in a room and take over the room. Our
Exactly.
stories are meant, our trauma is meant to bring us to the door, and then the door gets open and the lessons go
Yeah.
into the room. But our trauma
Yeah.
stays behind because we all have it.
Yeah.
There isn't many women that haven't been sexually abused or raped or in domestic violence or infidelity or wanting to commit suicide. We all
Mhm.
have those. But what are we going to do with it? How
Exactly.
about it would be such a better thing that, when I wrote my story, The Journey of Josephine, and I got it published and it came to my house the first time that I held my book in the palm of my hands and I got to read my book and I spent the whole night reading, my story. And I cried and I wept and I was in just in awe and in devastation and just in pain. But once I closed that book, I said, you know what, God, that's not me anymore. But I want
Mhm.
to find her now. I want to find that woman and I want to give her the courage and I want to give her the bravery and the vulnerability
Mhm.
to be able to write her story because I want to lock arms with her. Because we don't
Yes.
have to stay in our trauma. I don't have to stay there, but I want to now touch people that in
Exactly.
their trauma and I want to say we don't have to live there anymore.
And I agree with you 100% on that. Writing is a way of healing ourselves, especially when you write your story.
Yes.
Um, when like my trauma still instilled with not being raised by either parent. My mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol. My father wasn't present a lot, but it took a toll on being raised by family members who did not treat me the best in so many
Mhm.
ways. It was, I can give you everything that you need materialistically, but I'm going to tear you down mentally is one of those things. And that trauma I carried for a long time. And then having some major health issues, I was like, God, listen, why am I going through all of this? And then I got tired of asking God, why am I going through this? And I started asking Him, what is the lesson that I need to learn now so that I can actually walk into what it is that you have for me? I don't want to dwell on my yesterday anymore. I don't want to do that, but I know that I have to release this and I need to stop asking you, why is this happening? But what is it that I can take from this and get to the next side? And God is He is a miracle worker in some ways and in more ways than I can even imagine. Because my thing is with him, I know I get on his nerves sometimes because I talk to him all the time. And I'm like, listen, some of these things that you have me doing and going out, and God, I'm not sure you meant this for me. And he's like, I did. I wouldn't put you in the space in which you're in. I wouldn't put you in the areas and I wouldn't remove people if I didn't think they needed to be there with you anymore. And so learning to trust God in everything and put him first. And before I even do anything, when I get up in the morning, that he's the first person that I talk to. And I'm always asking him to protect me and guide me and connect me to the people that he has for me. and remove those people who are not connected to the person, to the destiny that he has for me. Because sometimes we choose people because they feel good to us for whatever reason.
Yeah,
And
they feed into us.
yes, and I don't want people, and the stage that I'm in my life now, I don't want anybody to feel good to me. I want them to be good to me, according to what God has for me. And I'm a loner most of the time. It's either myself, my kids, my best friend, and that I don't really have a lot of people that I genuinely care for and talk to on a daily basis. My circle is very, very small, but all of the people that I am connected to are connected to God in a way, and we continuously grow and build together through our love for Christ.
Yes.
And I am grateful that I have a prayer life, and I'm grateful for the fact that when I prayed that prayer in the end of 2019 was, God, connect me to the people that are connected to the destiny in which you have for me, and remove those who are not, and help me to be okay. Because sometimes we want to hold on to people just because of the history we have with them. And that history means nothing if it's toxic, if it's going to keep you reliving the trauma that you've been trying so desperately to let go of. And if you're not willing to trust God and say, God, I'm going to give this person to you, I'm going to surrender this to you, and I'm going to not keep looking at the back door, but look at the front door and let him do what he needs to do. It's sometimes hard to do that, but I've learned that God is not going to place you in a space that he's not going to protect you from, and he's not going to allow any hurt, harm, or danger to come to you if you trust him the way that you say that you do. And I think some people have a hard time surrendering their lives to God because they are still so caught up in people pleasing. Do you think that's one of the things that people have an issue with, surrendering over their walk to God, with God?
I just, when my grandchildren wanted me to, I'll use this as an example. When one of my grandsons wanted me to dress up as the Grinch for
Okay.
when there, and I have no idea. I've never watched the movie The Grinch, so I didn't know how
Okay.
the Grinch acted. But I dressed
Hmm.
up as the Grinch. He wanted me to. He wanted me to take pictures with him, dress up as the Grinch. I rode my bike around the neighborhood, knocked on people's doors, and I tried acting like somebody that I didn't even know.
Hmm.
And I realized what a word picture.
Hmm.
What we do as Christians, we put on masks and we put on costumes that don't even belong to us. And we're
Right.
walking around with those costumes, and we're walking around with those masks thinking that we can be that person. But the problem is that we really don't even know that person. I don't know the Grinch. I don't know how the Grinch acts. So here I'm pretending because I didn't want to really deal with who I was. And I think the first thing that people need to do, and women especially, we need to take off our masks. We need to be able to take off our masks, take off our costumes. And in fact, I was on a podcast the other day, and I said one thing that as women we need to do, and it's different as you grow older. Take our clothes off and stand in the mirror and see ourselves for how God sees us. When we're in our 20s and our 30s, we're like, we're looking, all the imperfections. I'm 55 years old, and now I see those imperfections as blessings. When I see that my top half droops down with the gravity, I now can see and look at the story that I had the privilege to nursing 6 babies.
Yes.
There's a reason why they're drooped down and there's no gravity anymore, because I spent those years, nursing
Yeah.
6 babies in a rocking chair. When I see the
Hmm.
stretch marks and the cellulite and and all of the scars, I can now see that I gave birth to twins. I
Yeah.
can now see the stories of the births that I have been able to give. When I see the roly polies and the mushroom tops, I can see now the stories of the dinners that I have made for people that have sat around my table. I
Yeah.
can now see the people that have been blessed because I invited them into my home. You begin to start, when I see the scars, on my breast because I had them burned, I can now see the story that God took me and he put a new covering over me. You know,
Mhm.
so when we begin to start seeing things, and now I can see I not only am beautiful from my body, but
Mhm.
what God has done on the inside of us as women. And I think that
Yeah.
the older that we are, the more that we become. I'm past 40. I'm into my 50s. And now I just have me, I'm already an empty nester. I've already had to deal with the grief and the pain of being an empty nester, and trying to figure out, who am I without being a mommy? Who am I without being a homemaker? And
Yeah.
then beginning to see the beauty that's within. But it starts with giving up the masks.
Mhm.
And I wrote a blog one time, is that, how dare I say that I am ugly, when God, I am the only Bambi. I'm the only one that carries this fingerprint. There is
Mhm.
nobody else. There is only one of me. So who am I comparing myself to if there's only one of me? Who am
Yep.
I saying that is better than me if I'm the only Bambi? Who am I
Exactly.
saying that I'm not touching the world if I'm the only Bambi? He created me for this
Yes.
sphere, for this atmosphere, for this. He gave me the only fingerprint.
Yes.
There is a Bambi. So who am I judging myself to? Who
Yeah,
am
who are you comparing yourself
who
to?
am I comparing myself to? I can't compare myself to you because you have a different DNA than I do. You have a different fingerprint than I do. So why am
Yes.
I comparing? Why am I not just understanding that I've been fearfully and wonderfully made, that I've been molded in the palm of his hands? I have been
Yes.
on the potter's wheel, and he has taken me as clay, and he has made me whole, and he has chiseled me away. He has
Yep.
taken the life, he has taken the hurts and the pains of the life that have been burnt and that have been put down as ashes, and he has created something beautiful.
Yes.
He has done that, but yet I wanted to compare myself to other people and my talents to other people, when there's no comparison. I am it. I
Exactly.
I am the Bambi. And if we can
Yes.
and understand that and acknowledge that, and know, one thing that I tell women all the time is that when you look at an oyster shell
Mhm.
is pretty beat up because
Yeah.
it's been beat up. It's been
Mhm.
gone through this dismay. It's gone through the parasites trying to sneak inside and pushing itself into the oyster. It's
Yeah.
been the hurricanes and the waves, and the sand's been trying to push in and push in. And all of that created, there was nothing inside of that oyster shell, nothing inside of that oyster shell until it has gone through something.
Mhm.
And then when you open up the oyster shell, you see this beautiful pearl that has been formed out of distress. This
Yeah.
beautiful pearl that has been formed out of heartache. And the
Yes.
bigger the pearl,
The heart of the irritant in there. Yes.
that is such a
Yes.
God thing. And knowing that a pearl is the only thing that, when you put a pearl onto your chest, it takes your oils from you.
Mhm.
And it lasts from generation to
A
generation
generation.
to
Yes.
generation. What an amazing word picture on what God does into our lives. What an amazing thing that he takes our lives and he passes down the lessons and the turmoil and the falling down over and over again, and he takes it from generation to generation for my grandchildren and my great grandchildren to see that their nana blessed God, that their nana
Exactly.
fell a whole lot, but my nana kept getting back up.
Exactly.
That's so amazing if we would think about that. And if we would
Yeah.
think about even the story, let's even talk about, you have butterflies. Let's talk about the story of the
Yes.
butterfly. When a butterfly lands an egg on a milkweed, we'll talk about the monarch butterfly. That egg is a butterfly. That's a
Mhm.
butterfly. But then
Yes.
it has to go through some stuff. You know,
Yes.
the metamorphosis of it, it has to go through some stuff. It has
You
to
gotta get through all of that ooey gooeyness
And it
in
has to
order
go through
to
the
come.
shedding. Yeah,
Yes.
the shedding, and then it has to go into this chrysalis. And I think that's what God does to us. He puts us into this chrysalis for us to be told over and over again, because the Bible tells us that we must renew our minds daily. So over and over again, when that caterpillar is inside of that chrysalis,
Mhm.
being
Yep.
told over and over again, you're really a butterfly. You're really a
Yeah.
butterfly. You're really a butterfly. And the moment that that caterpillar understands and gets it, he emerges.
Yes.
He
And he's
emerges
beautiful.
this
And
beautiful butterfly.
exactly. One thing I want to go back and touch on that you said is being able to see ourselves, taking that moment. And this is something that I've been doing since 2007, when I separated from my children's father, my ex-husband. And that is the self inventory, basically the stripping down of all clothes and everything, and standing in that mirror and looking at what I thought then were flaws, and understanding what was good about me that I thought, what was bad about me that I thought, the things that people had called me. Like I said, I ain't always been called a child of God. I've been called some other things by some folks. But even still, understanding that God's image of me was never imperfect. It was always perfect from the day that I was conceived in my mother's womb, is
Absolutely.
that I was already perfect. And I've had to learn that there was nothing wrong with me, even when people doubted me and said that I wasn't going to be anything, that I was just going to be a drunk and an alcoholic and a drug addict, just like my mom. Those things for a long time I identified with that. And then I was like, I'm nothing like my mom. I'm nothing like this woman. And so when people would come around and they'd be like, well, you're Alfreda's daughter. And I was like, yeah, don't say that too loud. I was embarrassed. But then when I got to know my mom on a level, because I think we oftentimes forget that our parents had lives before they had us. And so learning that my mother's history was not perfect. She went through some things as a child and as a teen and as a young adult, and having me when she was just a teenager was hard for her. And so when I identified with the broken pieces of her, were also the broken pieces of myself. And so learning to heal my broken pieces and being with my mother before she transitioned over, I got to have that mending relationship and understanding that her hurt and her pain, she learned how to adjust, not necessarily say live, but she adjusted to her trauma.
Yes.
And she did make peace with God before she left here, because my mother was never a religious woman. She never spoke of God. She never acknowledged him at all, as far as I knew, until her final 6 months. And she would talk to me about God. And then the other thing was the book that I wrote, Overcoming Childhood Trauma, My Journey to Healing. In that book, I spoke about my relationship with my mother, the relationship that I had with my father, my ex-husband, and so on and so forth. But the greatest part about that was my mom said the woman that I spoke of, which I was talking about her, she no longer recognized, because she had given her life over to God. And so she didn't know that the woman that I was speaking of anymore, because that wasn't who she was in her final days. And so that really touched me in a way, because it's like, number one, she read the book. Number two, she couldn't no longer identify with that broken version of herself.
Absolutely.
And that was an amazing thing for her to say that. And my kids were like, why would she say she doesn't know that woman? I said, because she's been made anew. She has a relationship with God now. And that old version of her is no longer in existence. So it was a wonderful experience, a healing time, and we bonded over though our trauma. My mom was able to share with me things that she never even probably told anybody else, and I'm grateful that I had that time in those moments to make sure that we didn't go into the rest of what she had left, and for me the rest of what I have of my life, trying to figure out if I had said enough, if I had said everything that needed to be said, and if she was able to hear everything that she needed to hear. And my mom got to experience me doing the podcast and things of that nature as well. And I just want to make sure that I'm continuously walking in the purpose that God has for me and taking off my own mask. It's not always easy. I'm not one for my identity is wrapped up into my children. Number one, I don't really know life outside of them, and there's some new things that are happening in my life, and I'm struggling with them a little bit now. But I go to God every time I'm having those moments of God. I'm unsure right now. I'm not sure if this is right for me, if I'm supposed to be moving here, if I'm supposed to be doing that. So I go to him first, and he's like, I wouldn't put you in a space to where it's not time for you to move. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you, but I'm gonna have a couple of more questions. We're gonna meditate and we're gonna talk about this a little bit more. But that's the goodness of God. If you be still and you allow Him to speak to you. Do you go to the water when you need to talk to God? I know I do
I
because
do. That is the where I go, whenever I have conversations, wherever I need to. That's where I went to write both of my books. I actually live in the Golden Isles of Georgia. I'm a
okay,
transplant, so I moved from Buffalo, New York to the Golden Isles of Georgia, and they have
okay,
Driftwood Beach. It's called on
yeah,
Jekyll Island, and that's where I wrote my two books. Was on the water, and I think about what you were just saying. Your mom or you or myself, we had a different puzzle that we thought,
hmm,
as we're walking around the store and we're seeing puzzles and we're going, oh, I'd love to put that one together. And we bring it home, we put all the pieces on the table and we start putting together. And for some reason, the puzzle isn't looking like what the box said it looked like.
uh-huh,
That is our lives. That's what life is.
yes,
Still a masterpiece. Even once the picture and the puzzles are put together, it's still a masterpiece. It's not the masterpiece that we thought it was going
yes,
to be, but it's still a masterpiece. And so
yeah,
when I think about that, and I think about the times in my life that I fall into my knees and say, God, where am I going? What are we doing? Where are we? Where are you taking me? And I think that people need to know that that's okay to ask those questions. I think people need to know and understand that it's okay to be angry for a moment. It's just not okay to stay there. I think
right,
people need to know, and there needs to be deaths in their lives, the death of the promise, the death of a marriage, the death of growing old with somebody, the death of your children leaving. Those are all deaths. And
mhm,
sometimes we're told to just cling to God, just cling to God, which is true. And I'm not
mhm,
saying it's not true, but there's moments that our hands are like, I can't cling to God. You just
right,
can't stay there because you have to grieve the things
yes,
you lost. Your mother lost a childhood too, just as
mhm,
much as you lost a childhood. You both
yes,
lost. It's kind of like the whole circle of the book, The Shack. When the
yes,
father lost his childhood, it goes from generation to generation,
mhm,
that we're not, but what we need to do is that we need to be like the eagle.
yeah,
The eagle only has one enemy,
mhm.
and that enemy is the crow. And so that enemy, the crow, goes on top of the eagle and eats away, tries to eat away. And
Yeah,
do you know the eagle doesn't try to push him off at all? All the
nope,
eagle does,
you just fly high,
he just
flying
keeps
high
flying high until the
until
crow
the crow
cannot
falls
breathe.
off. Yes.
Until the crow cannot breathe. I mean,
Yeah.
when I heard that analogy, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what we need to do.
Mhm.
That's what we need to do in our healing. That's what we need to do in our rediscovery. That's what we need to do in forgiveness, is that we just need to keep flying. We just need to keep going. And even if people are eating at the back of our necks and going after us, we need to not go like this and try to brush them off. We need to
Mhm.
just keep flying.
Exactly.
Keep
Exactly.
going. Don't stop the process. Even Joseph was thrown into the pit. His brothers didn't like him and didn't care for him. And even his brothers he was thrown into the pit. Daniel worshiped God and he did it all right. And he
Yes.
was still thrown into the lion's den. Shadrach,
Mhm.
Meshach, and Abednego, they did it all right, but they were still thrown into the fire. You know,
Yep.
we need to look at those stories and realize that God gave us those stories within the Word of God so we can know that we can hang on and that
Exactly.
we can know that we're not alone. You know, here you think
Exactly.
about the story of Moses, and there's a battle going on, and Moses is losing his strength. And then there's people that come up beside him and lift up his hands. And every time they lifted up his hands and lifted up his rod, they were winning.
Yeah.
That's what you need. You need those people beside you all the time
Exactly.
that are lifting up your hands and saying, you can do this, Bambi. You can do this. You can fight the battle. And I'm going to bring people alongside you that are going to help you to do that. And that's what we
Exactly.
need to we need to do. We're all going to have crows in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
All of us. There's
Yes.
not one of us that are going there. Not everybody likes me, and I'm a fun loving, awesome person. I like laugh. My friends that love me, we laugh until our stomach hurts and we pee our pants. That's
Yep.
the friends that you have. And but there are people that don't like me.
Yeah.
And I'm okay because I'm flying.
Exactly. I say the
I'm
same
okay.
thing.
I'm flying. I'm letting God do it and God work it out. And I know that I have a mission. I know that I have a purpose. I know that I wrote my book because God had called me. I know that these podcasts and these radios that I'm being on and sharing my story and next being on speaking platforms is because God had a mission. God gave me
Exactly.
a dream. When I was 28 years old, between 25 and 28, he gave me a dream. And that dream was he had called me onto a stage. And I walked
Mm.
out into the stage and I stood at the podium and I looked out into the audience and everybody was they looked homeless. They stunk and there was this nasty aroma. And they had
Mhm.
words written across their chest: unloved, ugly, unforgiven. All the negative words that we tell ourselves over and over again. And I started talking and I started telling my story. I started telling my story and how I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once found myself on a bridge ready to take my life. And then God rescued me. And as I
Mhm.
began to tell my story and as I began to weep of what God had done for me, I saw the audience and the audience was changing. The aroma changed like lilacs. It smelled like lilacs. And everybody had nice clothes on and they now had new words: beloved, set free,
Mhm.
forgiven, blessed,
Yes.
the daughter of the king. And God gave God gave me that dream 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And I'm now
God speaks to us in our dreams,
and
and
it's
if
like,
we're
but
paying
30
attention,
years, I'm going, God, this has been 30 years. Sometimes you
God
give
doesn't put
people,
a time.
he
No, God
doesn't put
doesn't
the
put a
time on it,
time. Yes.
but it has been now I can see
Mhm.
the doors opening. I can see, him working on my behalf. I can see him marching and opening up those doors. I can see him doing that. But it's been a long journey. And I tell that story because I want people to know that God is a suddenly God.
Yes.
He is a suddenly God. And you know what? You may be waiting and waiting and waiting. I've been waiting 30 years to be able to be on a platform to tell my story and to
Mhm.
allow my story to set women free
Mhm.
suddenly. Don't give up before the corner. Your miracle
Yeah.
is always around the corner.
It
Don't
is.
give up before. If God spoke to you, he's going to do it. He doesn't tell us how
Exactly.
long it's going to take. I'm 55 years old. He could have done it when I was, little better, little 30, and I could walk a little better and, I would look great in an outfit.
God doesn't do it that way.
He doesn't do it
He
that
does
way.
not work
But
that
he,
way. He
but
does
he
not work
does
on
work.
our time.
But he does work. And that's what I want your audience to understand. You are in a moment in your life that you're going, God, why, why, why? I'm telling you that our God is a suddenly God. Our God
Yes.
is a healer. Our God says, you speak to mountains and I'm going to move them. It's funny how we don't have to move them. He moves them for us. All we
Mhm.
have to do is speak. So
Yeah,
just keep
exactly.
speaking, keep pronouncing, keep going to Jesus and saying, Jesus, you're the mediator between God and me. You go up there and ask him, say, hey, Bambi's at it again. When are we going to answer her? You know,
Right.
Don't give up. Don't give up on your healing. And even if you go 2 steps back, doesn't worry. The Bible talks about that too. Talks about how
Exactly.
many times you're going to fall. But
Who knows?
getting up, that's going to matter. God talks about that. God talks about that. There's sometimes that we are going to be thee of little faith. He talks
Amen.
about that. He talks about everything that we need within the Word of God to set us free and for us to wait and to
Hmm.
be still and know that He is God. That
Amen.
He is God. So don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on what you think that God is not doing on your behalf. He is your Father.
God,
He cares
all
about
by
you.
himself.
And
Now,
yes,
how can they get in touch with you and order your books and anything?
yes, well, my books, I have 2 books that are out on sale right now, The Journey of Josephine, which is my account of my life
Okay.
and how God took a broken little girl and He transformed her by using my rag doll as my security blanket when I was a little girl. So that is out for sale on my website. So is my book, The Treasures of My Heart. It is the stories of different stories that in the midst of the storms, God showed up. And so those are both on my website, healingthroughstories.com, which is all one word. You can
Okay.
subscribe to my website, healingthroughstories.com, subscribe, and there will be a pop-up that you can order anything on my website and get a 10% discount on all of your orders. So there is a code that goes along with that, so you can order. Also, I am on all kinds of social medias, pretty easy to find. And my name's a little weird, it's so it's Bambi Lynn on all the social medias. I do have my 3rd book coming out, The God Who Sees, and that will come out in June. And it is about I took 29 different women of the Bible and I made them more relatable today. I talked about the issues that we have in our lives today. Just like one of the examples is that I told the story of Bathsheba, not from
Mhm.
not from the eyes of how everybody else looks at her, but through the eyes of a mother that lost her child and she had a
Okay.
rainbow baby. You know,
Okay.
Solomon was her rainbow baby, but it never
Yes.
takes away from the total pain of losing a child. So I
Yes.
made them more relatable today so women would know that God has covered every single situation and circumstance that we will be in our lives. He's covered them all within the Word of God. And so that will
Yes.
come out in June. That is The God Who Sees. So just go to my website, healingthroughstories.com, order your book today. And if you are looking for a speaker, for retreats or weekends or conferences, I am definitely somebody that is capable of doing that. And I would love the opportunity to be able to tell my story to set you free for your
Yeah.
story.
Well, I definitely have to have you back on the show because I have enjoyed this conversation and we will definitely be talking about the goodness of God all night.
Yeah,
However, we have a time limit.
that's
So,
okay. This
but
has been
it's
fun.
def- it has definitely been very, very fun. Definitely get used to hearing from me because, now we have developed a friendship.
Absolutely.
So, you can't get rid of me now. So it's okay. Just understand that that little short girl is gonna be coming to see you and talk to you and harass you and all of that good
That
stuff.
is awesome.
So
As long as you
just
don't mind some of the time the gravity isn't here.
it's okay. Listen, we talked about that because had I had I not, it's just sports bar down. That's what we got today. But I want to thank you so much for being here. And thank you guys for tuning in tonight because without you guys, I would not be able to do what I do. And before I close out, like I do always, and that is to remember to stay out of God's business. The only thing God needs you to do is be obedient to what He's called you to do. So until February the 27th, I'll see you guys then. Y'all have a good night.